I think this is for you because if I remember correctly, it was you many years ago who called me crying at 2 a.m. about a girl. I could be, I'm sorry.
Welcome to the Office Hours Podcast. This is TK Coleman and Isaac Morehouse. We're like the Geek Squad for your professional development. Got a job you're trying to get, a work-related issue you're trying to resolve, a project you're trying to complete, an obstacle that's holding you up? Well, you're in the right place. You bring the problem, we bring the nuts and bolts. This is where you get philosophical insight and actionable advice on how to take charge of your life and career.
Hey, you're going to love this next one, man. Where do those dating analogies come from? Here we go. Do you have to get your heart broken lots of times to become wise and successful and a good coach? Because it seems like you're constantly pulling out the perfect dating analogy to explain why having your heart broken isn't as big of a deal as you think, or how to push through rejection.
That was asked by someone anonymously.
I think that's for me.
I think this is for you because if I remember correctly, it was you many years ago who called me crying at 2 a.m. about a girl. I could be, I'm sorry. I told you I'd never
feel like
bring that up
was
again.
My 2011 NBA Finals LeBron performance where I'm never going to live that down.
That was the cramp game in the 2000. I remember.
I'll never be the GOAT because of that. Because of that one phone call where I cried over a girl. I'll never be the GOAT in your eyes. See, this is why you don't tell your friends about your problems. But man, I was going to say something.
But have you healed? I'm sorry. It was a very serious moment, and at the time I was not callous about it. It was just later somehow I turned it into a joke. Well, I guess that means that you've healed.
Yeah,
we can laugh about it.
Yeah, man, I feel. This reminds me of Colin Cowherd. I listened to his podcast, and under the YouTube videos, there's always a comment about waiting for him to use a divorce analogy, and he rarely fails. He almost always uses a divorce analogy when he's talking about basketball. It's the most amazing
like a messy divorce. Yeah. Well, okay, there's a couple things I want to pull out of this funny, odd question that may be fake. You might have planted.
No, this is real. This is not for me.
So there's sort of two things that we can talk about maybe. The one is like, do you have to have your heart broken a bunch of times to become wise and a good coach? So there's sort of a general thing like, do you have to experience a ton of failure and screw ups and pain in order to be able to help others navigate those problems? That's sort of one question we could talk about from there. And then the second one is dating analogies. So I don't know if this is what this is in reference to, but I've become so fond of using dating analogies on the job hunting market or the career market for young people because I think it's one of the only things that helps get through the fact that companies are run by human beings and humans make hiring decisions. And like there's nothing that makes it clearer to a person seeking attention from a company than to be like, think about dating, right?
Yep.
Like the fact that you will do better if you lead by talking about the company, taking the time to learn about them and genuinely being interested in them, that will help you more than any way you can format a resume or list your skills. People do not get that no matter how many times you say it. But if you use a dating analogy, instant. You say, hey, if you met someone at a party and you were chatting with them and you wanted to go on a date, would you be like, hi, these are 5 reasons I'm highly dateable. I would like to date you. Here's my number. That's how most people come across on the job market. Instead, you'd say, man, this has been a fun kind. You are so fascinating. I have loved talking to you.
Yep.
I would love to talk to you more because you are interesting. Would you be up for it? It's the same way. If you come to a company and say, wow, I saw this role that you were hiring and I almost fell out of my chair because I love what you do and this role excites me. Let me tell you why I'm interested in you. Nobody doesn't want to interview that person. That's why I use the analogy on the market all the time. It's not because I have a ton of dating experience. I dated one girl when I was like 16 and that was it. And then I started dating my wife when I was 17 and we got married when I was 19. So
I
have no experience.
I can make a Michael Jordan commercial like, I've been dumped 5,526 times.
I have failed more women and that is why I succeed.
And then just picture my wife, and that is why I succeed. No, this whole
Just
question.
don't post it on Facebook. Sometimes you've had pictures of you and Michelle on Facebook, and there's always a couple of very uncomfortable comments that are like, wow, that's your wife? Wow, TK, I didn't know. Wow, good for you. It's always like so awkward.
Well, dude, the other day, so my sister was on the news. She was on TV talking about, she's a neurologist, and she was just kind of talking about seizures and so forth. And I gave her a shout out, and some guy writes in the comment, "Wait, your sister's a doctor? Wow." And he capitalized, "Wow." Dude, what is my brand? What is my brand, man? That I'm getting these kinds of comments. It's the ghetto talk. Anyway, okay, so there's something interesting about this whole thing between suffering and wisdom that I like and that I don't like. It reminds me of the old school movie, The 5 Heartbeats, where there's a songwriter, the songwriter of the band. He gets a review where the critic says he's a great lyricist, but his songs will really come alive once he suffers more. And in the movie, it turns out true. As he begins to go through some things, there's a quality of depth that begins to characterize his music. His lyrics were less poetic and sophisticated as they were when he was younger, but now he's touching more people with his music because he's been through something. So I think there's something to that. But what I don't like about that idea is if it gets turned into a prerequisite. If you tell yourself, well, I can't coach, I can't help people out, I can't share what I have to offer because I don't think I have satisfied the suffering quotient. I haven't suffered enough. And the thing about suffering is life is faithful. Life will ensure that you will get your dosage of suffering. So you don't have to go seeking it out in order to become worthy of some blessing or worthy of some job. You will get your unique allotment of hardship and hard times. So don't go seeking it out. Just help with whatever it is you have now. But it is the case that everybody plays the fool. No exception.
No exception to the rule.
None whatsoever. We will all get our hearts broken, and we will all be the causes of someone else getting their hearts broken. And when that happens, I don't think, again, you need to make that happen in order to become wise. But when it happens, it will teach you about yourself. There's something about suffering that just makes you a better person. And I think that's a very optimistic framework. I used to write a lot of songs back in high school. Me and this guy named Vic Caputo, we used to write a bunch of songs in class. We'd sit in the back and we sing our love songs to the girls, and they would praise us, and we feel all good about ourselves. And so whenever we would have some bad situation, we would be like, "Oh man, we're gonna get a song out of this," and we get like really hyped up and excited.
Dude, if you want to write songs, you definitely need to get your heart broken. It'll inspire like nothing else.
Hey, seriously, but you can apply.
I used to joke with Heather, like, I can't write songs anymore. I'm like, my life is too balanced. So I need you to I need you to leave me for like 2 weeks, but make me believe it's real.
Yes.
And then come back and I'll have like 100 songs.
Right. Like, girl, you love me too much. I can't write any songs under these conditions.
It's some conflict.
But it's like that in life too. Like, you can get a song out of it. Use it as a metaphor that every bit of suffering that comes your way is something that you can cash in on. You can transform it into an opportunity. But no, you don't need to suffer. You don't need to wait on suffering.
So I have two further thoughts that spin out from this. One is the whole like, those who can't do teach, which is used as sort of an insult, like, yeah, those who can't do teach. And
I've always hated that statement.
Yeah, I don't really like it either. I mean, because it is certainly the case that those who can do, it is no guarantee that they can teach.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the worst teachers I ever had were like I had this one chemistry class at community college, and this guy was like apparently a really good chemist for this company. He was the worst teacher I've ever had in my life because he like quit his job as a celebrated chemist and started teaching. He was terrible.
It's a separate skill.
It's a totally separate skill. I mean, there are certainly cases where like if someone's like, I'm going to teach you how to get along with a sales manager, and they've never had to get along with a salesman. Like if it's real nuts and bolts, like I'm going to teach you how to take apart an engine, and I've never taken apart an engine. I get that, right? You want someone who knows the context of what they're talking about, but teaching is a very different skill from doing. And so it doesn't necessarily mean like some people, Like, you've been this way. We joke about this all the time. Since I got married and had kids, we had our first kid, 14 years ago. You have been the most useful person to talk to about parenting stuff of anybody I know. And you're like the only one of my friends who's never had a kid. Like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Not the only one, but so somehow something about the way you see the world gives me something that I don't have, but that helps me as a parent. So it's not like only people who have had kids and suffered. Now, those people have been through something and they bring a different something to the table. And you can tell. I can talk to people who have had kids and grandkids who are in a different state that often bring me a perspective that's useful as well. Just like that business owner I talked to that was like, so what? You didn't get it right. He'd been through that, and something about his confidence in that helped me. So like, it may be the case, but it is not necessarily the case. You don't have to have been through certain things as a prerequisite. If people are finding your advice or counsel valuable, then they're finding it valuable. You don't need some permission slip or to have done a certain number of things in order for that to be the case, you know?
You know, there are two mistakes I see people make in relation to this. Both are opposite extremes. One is refusing to learn from someone else's wisdom because you see them as privileged. The other is refusing to share the wisdom you have to offer because you're insecure about your own perceived privilege. And I think both of those things are a complete distraction when it comes to you gathering the information you need to give yourself the advantages that you want. You have to be selfish about the learning process. All that matters when it comes to learning is that you're getting what you need out of the experience. If the person teaching you is richer than you, prettier than you, more loved than you, none of that matters. What matters is that they're giving you something that you can figure out how to use in your own life. And the reverse is also true. If you're talking to someone and you're thinking to yourself, well, I have too many advantages, I'm too privileged, let them make the call about what they're going to do with that information. But if the opportunity presents itself to be generous, be generous.
So there's one final thing that spins off from this question. Who knew that this question would be so fertile, right?
Right.
There is a sense in which I think it is absolutely necessary to have your heart broken as a precondition of becoming an adult, of living an independent adult life. Now, I know, I don't know how different this is for women versus men, but I know for myself being a man and for young men I have encountered, especially, this is true in a way that I understand more clearly. So I'll talk about that. And I think it probably relates with women, but there may be some differences or nuance I'm missing. But you know when you've seen the young guy who's never been made a fool by a girl or never had his heart broken or never had that experience yet of realizing I'm more into her than she's into me. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be about a girl, but this is the most common thing with a teenage boy. And once, because boys are kind of like, I think the stereotype sort of gets it wrong. I think boys are very, very romantic and sentimental and like naive, and they kind of fall head over heels with like a girl, their first crush or whatever it is. And until they kind of get that smack in the face of reality that like, oh, just because I'm a good guy who like really likes some girl doesn't mean that good things are going to happen to me by default, right? It's not the same as with my parents who just love me unconditionally, right? Like,
yeah.
And that's like a really hard lesson, I think, but you can tell the young guys who have gone through that versus those who haven't. And again, it doesn't have to be with a girl, but I think there's something. I was reading about like ancient initiation rites and how like, you know, you look at all these different tribes and cultures and it seems so odd and barbaric, these weird things. And maybe they are odd and barbaric, but they came about for a reason. So like waking up, 13-year-old in the middle of the night, their parents like put on a scary mask, wake them up, and then go like bury them alive in the woods and walk away. And the kid has to like climb out. And like some of these sound like horrific, or send them out to kill a lion or whatever. And I think I was thinking about this. I don't even remember where I heard this, on some podcast or something. And I was thinking about this because I had been thinking about the whole like getting your heart broken. Like I've met some guys where I'm like, dude just needs a girl to break his heart so he can realize that he's the man and learn to face the universe on his own. He needs that girl's attention too much, and he's becoming, and I was like this when I was a teenager, and he's becoming this sort of weak version of himself. And I started hearing this like initiation rites, whatever, and I thought there's something in there that sounds so cruel, but it's so necessary. It's like your parents wake you up in the middle of the night, drag you out in the woods, and bury you alive, and leave, and you got to get out.
Don't try this at
home.
Don't try this at home.
What is that symbolizing? It's like, hey, guess what? The world doesn't care about you. It's no one's job anymore as an adult. As a kid, it's your parents' job to make sure you're okay. Realizing that it's nobody's job to ensure your happiness and safety and protection. That's what becoming an autonomous adult free agent person is realizing it's like once you realize the world doesn't care about you and you make your peace with that, well, then it turns out you'll have all kinds of friends who do care about you and whatever. There's this great article, I think it's on Cracked or something, and it's pretty old, but I've read it a handful of times. Yeah, it's cracked.com. It's called 6 Harsh Truths That Will Make You a Better Person. And it's very funny and witty, and like it was the beginning of those like BuzzFeed style articles, but it's actually really good.
I remember that.
It uses the Glenn Ross speech where Alec Baldwin's like, you're a good father, who cares? You need to sell or we'll fire you. And it's like, wow, that's so cold. But it's like, look, the sooner you get it through your head, it's nobody's job. It's nobody's full-time job to care about your well-being. And no one's going to inherently care about you just because you're a good person or just because you exist. Your parents do when you're a kid, but that's what the process of growing up is, realizing that you have to make your way in the world. And in a way, that process, it's like the death and rebirth. It's like getting your heart broken, realizing, oh my gosh, no one else is going to do it for me, right? No one's going to inherently just like me or love me because I'm a good person. Like, the universe, nature, is unfeeling. If I walk off a cliff, I'll just die. The sidewalk won't say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to let you get hurt, right? Like,
yeah.
That's reality. And once it hurts and it's cold and hard at first, but then once you realize it, you can sort of become an adult, become autonomous, come into your own and be like, well, I'm going to meet the world and I'm going to show it, right?
Yeah.
And there is a way in which like that heartbreak process needs to happen,
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of like the healthy version of having a chip on your shoulder. I mean, because I've met people who would listen to you say that, and because they're a really compassionate, empathetic person, they would go, oh, but I'm not like that. I would love that person unconditionally. Well, I'm not like that. And to that person, I would say, that's great, but I still wouldn't trust you with my dreams, right? Because you don't have the power to live out my regrets. You don't have the power to internalize my unhappiness for my unlived life. I got to do me. I've got to take charge of my own life. I mean, so even if it is someone's job to take care of you, you're never going to find that person. Yeah. And even if you find someone who claims to be that person, they are never going to show up as much as you need them to.
You are never going to get what you need from another person, and especially not from them just anticipating what you need. You got to know it, and you got to go find a way to get it, to exchange value for it, to articulate it,
And that's one of those truths that everybody needs their own version of the wake-up call. That's what you're saying. You got to have that wake-up call. Yep. All right. Here's a question that came in from Eric on Twitter. To what extent can a person change their identity? For example, can someone who has been unreliable and trustworthy all their life then become someone who is the complete opposite? If so, how?
I mean, I think you can absolutely change, and I think the only way is, as my late grandfather used to say, I was a great wall of China built, one shovel at a time.
Yeah.
It really, like, if you've been untrustworthy, you can become trustworthy. But you can't be like, you know what, I'm going to be a trustworthy person.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be trustworthy. That's one that especially is going to take a long time. It's going to take a repeated pattern every single day, little by little by little, of becoming that person. And so it's just, can you say, here's a goal of something I want to become. I want to change. I want to be more this way. What's one thing I can do every single day so that when I go to bed at night, I can say, I moved just a quarter inch closer to being that today than I was yesterday. And that will begin to compound. I think that's absolutely possible. And I think that's a very hard thing. I think it's a very hard thing to realize, because it's very easy to be like, well, I just am the way I am. Like, yeah, I'm rude to people a lot, but like, that's my personality. It's inseparable. No, actually, I am capable of being me while at the same time being someone who's not rude to people all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like if I want to be, I can start to work towards that. And that's a very hard realization because it's easy to be like, oh, it's just part of my personality. I can't change. But if you really want to, you can. You can. I believe that.
Yeah, I believe that too. So I really like some of Martin Seligman's insights when it comes to this and his ideas on learned helplessness, learned optimism. He talks about how if you look at the language of optimism versus helplessness, the language of helplessness is tenseless and it is identity based. So you would say, I am a screw up. That's in the eternal present and it's about who you are as a person. The language of empowerment would be, I made a mistake. Now that's in a past tense, and it's very specific, and it's about what you did
this one time, or I screw up often. Even.
Yeah. So I look at that question, untrustworthy all their life. Well, first, that's not entirely true. We're speaking in absolute terms, and I've never met anyone who has been untrustworthy all their life in some absolute sense. You said the truth at some point. You've gotten things right. Okay, being there's a difference between
I have been untrustworthy more often than I would like to be, or something. Even though it sounds like we're like semantics, it's a very powerful change by changing language.
Yeah, that is huge. I mean, there's a difference between being infallible and being incompetent. Just because you are infallible doesn't mean you are incapable of getting something right. So you've got to start with recognizing all the times in your life where you have told the truth, where you have gotten things right, where you have done a good job, all those times. And so by quantifying it in this way, you actually size your problem down. And this isn't some sort of self-help trick where you're BSing yourself in order to feel good. This is actually more truthful. This is a logical move to make, to move from an absolute vague description to something that is more concrete and specific, thus making it smaller. That's what the evidence supports. So I would say in order to make this transformation, you got to get out of the identity trap. Forget about trying to become a reliable person. Think about how you became unreliable. You became unreliable by doing some specific unreliable things at specific times. And that's how you're going to get out of it. You're going to do some specific reliable things at specific times. And you will look back in time and you'll find that, hey, the state of being reliable is just the accumulated effect of having done so many specific reliable things over time.